Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the series of mindful physiology. As I mentioned in my previous videos, mindful physiology was one of the ways I could start being more in touch with my body, speaking with him when I had an illness or I was not feeling well, and also to feel this connection between the body and the mind from a physiological point of view. So it gave me more understanding and also gave me more tools to be able to visualize my body inside. When I did that and I was able to see more or less how my body was looking like inside and the functions that he was doing, I was more able to connect with the body uh, for healing purposes, but as well for enjoyment, to find my more awe in life, more joy, just purely coming from the admiration of what this body does for us. So in the two previous videos, in the first one, we saw this capacity of the body for changing, which for me is the fundamental concept in physiology, knowing that the body can adapt itself when there is a change. Change can be a good stress coming from exercise, for example, or maybe a change in temperature. Any change that happens, the body is able to restore to normal levels. And then in the last week, we covered the cell, which is the minimum structure, the smallest structure from which everything is formed. So we review that from the cell, many cells form tissues, then tissues form organs, organs systems, and so on, until we have the entire biosphere. Today, I'm gonna start in system by system. So today we are gonna cover the structural system. What I mean by a structural system is the system that build up our body, that build up this, that make this building. And those are the muscles, the bones, the muscles, the joints, but there are also the tendons, the ligaments, the cartilage. Those all are what is called in physiology connective tissues. So it's still a group of cells, but in a particular way that form these tissues for movement, connective tissues. There are other connective tissues like the blood and the lymph as well. They are. I'm not going to talk about them in this. I'm going to focus today only in the bones, the muscles, and the joints. So let's start first with an awareness exercise. I want to take you in. So sit wherever you are. Sit in a comfortable position where you, with your back straight and touching the ground with your feet. From there, start by taking 2, 3 deep breaths in, inhaling deep and exhaling slow. Inhaling deep, exhaling slow. Inhaling deep, exhaling slow. Now come back to doing your normal breath without pushing, without forcing your breathing, and focus your attention in the area above the upper lip and below the nostrils. place all your attention in that little area and in your breath. If your mind goes, return them back to the point. You can even take your hand with your finger, touch this area above the upper lip and below the nostrils. So you can create the habit that every time the mind goes wandering, she knows that she has to return here and pay attention to your breath in this area. In that point, you may feel that the air is coming cold inside, and you might feel that the air, when it leaves your body, is warm. Just pay attention to your breath. Let your breathing be as it is. If it is slow, it's slow. If it is fast, it's fast. Let it be as it is at this moment. Just observe. Now, imagine that you walk in front of a mirror and you see your skeleton there. Imagine yourself with your size, with your structure, there in the mirror, but in bones. And start checking every part of you. Check your head. Look at your skull. Move down to the neck bones, your backbone, your lower back, your hips, your thighs, your knees, your shins, your ankle, your feet, and your toes bones. You are looking with curiosity every single bone inside of you. Check out the color maybe of the bones. Realize that they might be short, with long, depending on your own structure. They might be narrow or wide in some parts, like in your hips. Look how your structure is. Now reflect that all those bones are separate parts, and thanks to a sophisticated structure, they are tied together, grouped together. thanks to the tendons, to the ligaments, and to the muscles itself. They are grouped to make your body. So you are a group of bones organized or settled in certain way that allows you from simple bones, separated simple bones, build your body which is able to walk, to run, to dance, to bend, to stand up, to stretch. Reflect, how do you feel to see your body in this way? This group of bones perfectly aligned together. What do your bones inspire you? Does this configuration of bones inspire you something? Do you feel more curious about how it works, how they look inside, how you can communicate with them, and even what can you do to help them to be more healthy? Now look again at that mirror, the entire body in front there in the mirror, the skeleton of your body, your unique architecture, and admire. See it for a moment dancing, the bones dancing, moving in front of the mirror. Move your attention to the skull only, to the head bones, and give a smile to that face of bones that you have in front. And see how that skull smiles you back. Receive that smile, and with your hand, place that smile in your heart. Now return your attention back to the area above the upper lip and below the nostril. Feeling your breath there. Take one or two more breaths. And when you are ready, open your eyes. My computer was locked during the awareness practice. When I started to review the information about, again, the bones and the muscles for this session, I came across with a song that was first recorded in 1928, and it's a spiritual song by an American, performed by an American group, and the name is Them Bones. I'm just gonna say some sentences from the song, but I'm gonna put in the link of this video one of the versions so you can listen to it. The song says something like the finger bones are connected with the hand bones are connected with the wrist bone connected with the arm bones connected with the elbow bones connected with the upper bone, the upper arm bone is connected with the shoulder bone connected with the neck bone is connected with the head bone. Obviously, it's sung in a much better way than my voice, but when I heard this song, it was very powerful, because in the same way that understanding physiology helped me to have more love for my body, I knew that already in 1928 there were a group of people who were inspired by how individual parts of our body are connected, and that some of those areas can be still a mystery in how they work. So that was enough inspiration for me to learn a little bit more, but beyond the knowledge in how it works, is see if I can see that, if I can use that information to connect with the bones and the muscles, and see how can I help them to be healthy with that information. And this information we all know because we learn this in school. So this can be another way in how when we learn in the school, how when the kids go to the school, can get this information and then imagine that information inside of the bodies. That will bring not only knowledge but wisdom. Okay, so this is part of this song. So I'm going to start, as I mentioned, I will talk just briefly about the bones, the muscles, and the joints. So first ones are the bones. The bones are mineralized tissues. So remember that a tissue is a group of cells. But in the case of the bones, are cells that are mineralized. That means that they have compounds like calcium, phosphorus, that we in general know that the bones have. The interior of the bones is filled with spongy tissue, marrow, and blood cells, and they are wrapped in a casing of collagen fibers and solid calcium. But what calls my attention here is that the bone marrow, that is the inner part inside of each bone, makes or is responsible to produce the components of your blood that we need to survive. It produces the red blood cells that carry the oxygen. It produces also the white blood cells that prevent infections and control the bleeding. So if there is an absence in the bone marrow, that can be fatal for us. So as you can see in this photo, the hard calcified bones are channels and cavities that are filled with cells that break down and regenerate the bones in a process that is called bone remodeling. So this process of bone remodeling, it shows us the perpetual capacity of the body to build and regenerate and restore, to build and restore. When we think about the bones, we usually think that because they are made of mineral, they don't they are not too much alive. They are not much alive as we think the heart is or the lungs are. We think that the heart is more alive than our bones. But when we see from a physiological point of view, and then we understand and feel the bones, we know that they are very much alive because with that structure that they have, they are designed, as I mentioned, to build and regenerate. And what it happens is that when we move, when we walk, for example, any movement we do, the muscles create a pressure in the bones, right? Because the movement, so there is pressure in the bones. And the bone, to protect or as a response, it starts making itself stronger through this process of creating new bone. So this is how the creation and destruction of the old bones happen. It happens because there is movement. So it means that if we sit down forever and we don't move, the bones so quickly will dissolve and disappear because there is no pressure that push the bone and kind of incentivize the bone to be stronger and bigger. For me, this process of generating pressure in the bone and seeing from there that the bone is able to become stronger and denser is so inspiring, also at a psychological level, to understand what resilience is, how we become stronger in the face of tough situations. It is probably becoming from the same principle of how the bones become stronger. Another important aspect is that when this process of regeneration happens, depends on how much pressure it has. So the more parts in our body are involved in the movement, the more the brain will have to work and the stronger and denser the bones become. To do this process of regeneration and breaking down the bones, as I said, the first important thing is the movement. If there is no movement, there is no regeneration, and there is no building up strength in the bones. But it needs some nutrients also. The nutrients, remember, come from the food that we eat. They get absorbed in the gut. They pass through the blood. From the blood, it moves to the tissues, and the nutrients go there in the blood, in the blood vessels, arrive to the tissues, feed the cells inside of the tissue, and this is how the process of energy and regeneration and all the processes happen. So in order to have this, some nutrients are required. So we all know that for good bones, we always have to have a good intake of calcium. This is the first thing that we know that is required. So yes, there's a nutrient there, a key nutrient, which is calcium, after movement. But here I'm gonna open some brackets apart from this mindful physiology to start introducing a concept that I'm gonna explain in very detail in the next season, in a couple of weeks ahead, on mindful nutrition, which is gonna be a free detailed course in nutrition. But I'm gonna insert some bit of information here because I find it useful for this part of the bones, especially because there are so many myths around the calcium, which sources of calcium, how much calcium I have to have in order to have healthy bones. And this is that when we talk about nutrients, the nutrients that the body needs, we have to consider three things. The first one is ensuring that yes, we are taking the calcium in with the food, with good sources of calcium. The second one is ensuring that that calcium is being absorbed in the gut, because if it's not absorbed in the gut, the calcium will never arrive to the bones and it will go to waste. So it doesn't make too much sense to have good intake of calcium if it's not absorbed in the body. And the third point, which is another important that too many times is neglected, is to be sure that our body in other areas, the other functions of the body are working well, and they are not stealing calcium from the bones to compensate another failure in the body. So we have to ensure that we put the calcium, but we have to ensure that there is not stealing from other things that are happening in the body. So in the chapter of nutrition, specifically in the topic of minerals, which is very crucial for our health, I will explain more on details when the situation of stealing minerals from the bones happen or from the body happen, so we are more aware of how to avoid those situations. Because if we have that situation in our body, even if we eat the right amount of calcium and the better quality, that will not work at all, because there is a leakage somewhere else. So we have to fix the leakage first. Okay, this is about the bones. So the bones are a spongy tissue, and in there we have the bone marrow, which is key for our survival. When I reread and relearn about the bone marrow, I saw and I felt the bone marrow like the womb, like our womb in women. It's this inner part inside of us where life is created. So for me, there is a kind of comparison that we can do there between these two parts of the body, the bone marrow and the womb. This is the bones. And we need some nutrients. We need calcium. And also, I forgot, we need vitamin D. So vitamin D is the one that helps us to absorb the calcium in the body. So we check the second important point in nutrients. We have vitamin K2, which activates the proteins to build up the bones. And we need movement, which I said before is the most important one. It's number one, movement. Okay, the second part is muscles. So first thing that we have to remember, because we saw all of this in biology, is that for the movement to happen, or the movement happens better, because the brain and all our nervous system is involved. So there is a huge connection into making a movement and the brain. And how it happens is in instants, like very small fractions of seconds, how it happens, all this create movement in our body. So the first thing that happened is that I had the intention to move. So this part of the brain, inside of this, like in the middle of the brain, there is a section called the motor cortex. That section sends as an electricity sign to the arm, if it's the one that I want to move, and as a consequence, the muscles here contract. And exactly at the same time, or very soon, the muscle send another electrical sign back through the peripheral nervous system, through our spinal cord, to arrive to the cerebellum, which is here at the back. And what the cerebellum does is to coordinate and make the movement smooth. Otherwise, we will never be able to walk like one step behind the other. because there will be no control at all in the movements that we are doing. Mm? So when we review this from a bigger scope, and we understand that there is a connection here, electricity impulse sent here to the part I want to move, my arm, contract, and then it send information to the cerebellum, and then I can move harmoniously and do the movement in the direction I want to go. This makes me reflect even more in how movement not only is good for physical health, but how movement has a big part in our mental health. So when we move, the more movement, the more parts of our body we involve in the movement, like for example jogging or dancing, there are more parts of the brain involved. So to some extent you are stimulating more the brain to work and to be alive. So many of us, and I'm gonna just share my story. When I was a runner, I loved to run a lot since I was very young. But I did running like a competition, like a challenge, and I was always checking and tracking my time to do it better. And usually I was running with my headphones, listening to music. Then later in life, I realized that way of doing exercise probably was exercising my muscles. My muscles were becoming stronger, but I didn't have at the end the same kind of fulfillment and joy. And now I understand that is because, to some extent, my brain was not properly connected or involved when I was doing the exercise. So for me, just remembering this simple concept in how the movement happened, it just made me connect with movement and with the activities I do in a different way. And that is another very simple part of the movement, and is that for the movement to happen at all, there is always a process of contraction and relaxation. Is how it happens. So if I want to move my arm, if I move my arm, these muscles, the biceps, are contracted, and at the same time, these muscles, the triceps, are relaxed. And when I do the opposite movement, these muscles, the biceps, are relaxed, and the triceps are contracted. And that is what allow the body, this mechanism of contraction relaxation, allow the body to come back to the original position. And we don't feel apart in different components. So this is this general concepts around how the movement happens in our body and how the muscles work. There is a lot of involvement in the brain in terms of electrical signs, and also there is like a physical process, we can call it that, which is contraction and relaxation. When I was explaining this in a different class, someone said, this is like the yin and the yang. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful. This is how it is. I haven't seen the muscles in that way. So all the muscles all the parts in our body that have muscles that are able to move, they always have a pair to be able to contract and expand, contract and expand. Like here, there is the same concept happen in this muscle, with this muscle, the same in the legs, the same in our head. One is contracted, the other one is always relaxed. And seeing this like the yin and yang, it was quite a beautiful way to see that we are always two things are happening at the same time, that there are two opposites, to make a whole, and in this case the whole is the movement. So it would be a completely different experience if the next time you move, you remember, there is an electrical sign happening here. There is a response from my muscle to the cerebellum. There is a contraction and expansion. Contraction and expansion. Instead of setting best target in time to see when I'm gonna be doing the best record when I run, or how I perform better when I do an exercise. There is more joy when we engage both the mind and our heart, and we put them together to work harmoniously and link in a way that one supports the other. So this is one of the reasons why I like to share these simple concepts around the physiology of the body. These are just reminders that we all know. Now we move to the last bit, that are the joints. Before I talk about the joints, just remembering something I told you before, and it's that for the bones, for the muscles, and actually for every organ, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, everything, to be properly fed with good nutrients, the nutrients are right there because the blood, and the blood travels through the blood vessels, and is how through the blood vessels how the nutrients arrive to each part of our body and feed that part with nutrients, so those cells are able to rebuild, regenerate, and do all the functions that they have to do. We are right now to the joints, and this is a very interesting point. The joints, whatever they are, my knees, my elbow, in between the joints are the two endings of two bones together. Is when two bones meet together. But there has to be something in the middle of those bones, because if there is not something in the middle, there will be friction between the two bones. They are rigid, and that friction will create pain. But we have this tissue there, which is a cartilage. This is a different kind of tissue. The cells organize in a different way to create a special tissue here. In each joint, all the joints that we have. And around that tissue, there is a liquid, there is a fluid that is bathed in that cartilage. And what is interesting is that there are not blood vessels arriving to that part of the body. There are no blood vessels going until the cartilage. So how do they regenerate? How do they receive the nutrients from the body, the cartilage, to be able to regenerate and to work properly and to maintain this maintaining properly this work of being like the connection between two bones? Well, the way it happens is because movement. So every time we move, as I'm doing here, the movement makes pumping in and pumping out the fluid that is around the cartilage, that is full with nutrients. This fluid is full with nutrients, and when I move, there is pumping in and out of those nutrients inside of the cartilage and outside of the cartilage. And that is how the joint receives the nutrients and have the capacity to build, restore, and do all the functions that she has to do. So one of the properties of the joints is moisture, and that is the key element in keeping them healthy. So they have to be always wet. They have to have a good level of moisture, and that happens when we move. So this is again like one of the reasons why movement is important for our body. Okay, so I think this is from a physiological point of view, some ways in how we can take this information and use it. So next time we do exercise, we do movement. Now I just want to clarify something, and it's the difference between exercise and movement. So exercise is something very new for our modern times. It's something that we created very recently in life as a consequence of our sedentary life. Exercise nowadays involves like sports, and always it has behind this connotation of challenge, competition. Is something that we have to make a schedule to do it. And that is the reason it's very hard for some people, because they have to create a space to do something that is very natural for the human being, something that is innate to the human being, something that we can do freely all the time. Our ancestors, they move a lot because they have to farm, they were collecting food, they were hunting, so they were running. But when the hunt happened, stopped, they didn't run anymore because they knew that they were wasting their energy that probably they need for another period of time. And then later in our civilization, just before of the industrialized revolution, the industrial revolution, before that, still the women and men were more sedentary, but they were sitting in the floor. So when they stand up, they were engaging the core muscles. That was movement, that was making them stronger. They were doing something, and they had to go and have a check to their kids. So they didn't spend 6 hours in front of a computer without moving, or even not 6, even 1 hour full completed without standing up. They were standing up often because how life was settled at that point. So now that we have a very more sedentary life, we created exercise, but we are losing something. We miss something from what the usual way of moving the body was, and is bringing the brain into the exercise. And that is why there is a difference between exercise, which is this sport, special time, a special place to go, sometimes special clothes, against movement that can happen anytime, and we can incorporate in all the activities. And even it can motivate us to maybe grow some food as well in the garden, but also in the normal activities that we do. Like when we are driving and when we have to go to the office, we leave the car far away from the entrance, so we have to walk. There is movement there, and there is consciousness. Consciously, I'm gonna walk until the building, or using the stairs instead of the elevator, or in the house, placing the things, for example, in the kitchen, like the spices, in a place that we need to stretch to reach them. Those are things that can sound very simple and silly, and one might think that that is not going to exercise my body, but it does. It is how originally the body was designed for the slow movements. And again, is this like the invitation to bring the knowledge about the connections of the brain, the contraction, the extension, the bones, and the importance of the bone marrow inside, into any practice of movement that you do. Because with that, in that way, you will start speaking with you inside. when I started using mindful physiology to talk with my body, the last part I could connect with was they were the muscles and the bones. They were the difficult ones for me because I was not able to see them and I was not able to feel them as easy as I felt my heart or as I felt my lungs. When I was breathing, I was feeling that my lungs were inflating and deflating. I couldn't feel the bones at all. Then, understanding that the life is there in the middle of the bone, the origin of life, I would say. There, through visualization, I was able to travel inside. So to finish, I want to share something that I learned in a yoga class with Carmen, a very good yoga teacher, a couple of years ago. She invited us and guided us to go into the down forward dog yoga pose, and we went there after a couple of breathings, feeling our body and feeling the stretch of the body, which is more or less this what it does in the upper body. She invited us to close the eyes, and from there to start feeling how the strength that I was doing, how it was traveling through the muscle, cross the muscle, reach the bone, and in the bone, cross the bone to reach the bone marrow. When I did that exercise with her, I really felt I could speak with my bone marrow. Something very inner inside of my body that before I couldn't speak with. So this is a way of bringing the strength and everything that we have outside into our body. To feel, speak, and connect with it. And to bring the connection, involve the brain, so brain and body are connected when we are doing an activity. This doesn't mean that running or sports they are bad. No, there are no good, there are no bad. It's the way how we do it. So we are able to bring completely to do the activities in a complete meditative state, even if it's running, and at the end we will be able to touch something inside of us and to experience joy. So my invite today for this week for you are twofold. So the first one is, if you remember, when you cross a mirror, just look at the mirror again and imagine your skeleton in front, your own shape, your own architecture, and smile to your scalp. And if you have more time, just check all the bones of your body and see and admire the fact that all these bones are linked together. My second invite is to review how you can have a more movement-filled life. Because what I mean by movement-filled life is bringing more movement in your life, understanding that movement is a more conscious activity, meditative state, and see how you can experience the movement in a way that brings you so much pleasure inside and also stimulates the brain a lot. I think that is all what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next week with another mindful physiology session to continue connecting with other parts of our body. Thank you.